Welcome to the Marty and Jaden Show. I'm Marty, and this is Jaden. And by popular request, we have finally read Mistborn's Secret History.
Very popular. All the comments were saying, after you read Bands of Mourning, you have to read Secret History before you continue. So, we did.
We did. We listened. We listened to y'all, and we loved it. But... spoiler, we have read it before. This was not our first rodeo.
I barely even consider that having read it before, because
really?
When we read it this time, I was like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that I missed. Like, I remember some of the stories, but I think I needed to wait until reading Bands of Mourning because you get more Mistborn experience.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I think there was a lot more that I would have grasped with more Cosmere understanding.
True. Well, so you did the same thing as me. I had originally read this before I had read any of the Mistborn Era 2.
Yep.
And so reading Mistborn Era 2, it was really interesting to hear all the lore about Kelsier, ascending and things like that within the book. And it made sense because I had read that. But this technically wasn't supposed to be read until you'd finished Bands of Mourning. Yeah. So every time I read through that book, I think what would that felt like to read that lore and just wow, these people just came up with all sorts of crazy ideas that didn't actually happen, which actually did.
It's crazy how much it ties into the other elements that happen. And one of the things, as you were saying that, is Brandon Sanderson actually specifically mentions in both of these that he's going to be writing it. Like in Bands of Mourning, he says, hey, I'm going to take a break to finish this, and you should read it next.
Yeah.
And then in Secret History, he says, I finally got to this after Bands of Mourning. I've had ideas and written little pieces of it, and it was a little hodgepodgey because of that. I will admit it kind of was. There's a little bit of, disjointed story.
Yeah.
But overall, it was awesome.
Oh, yeah, totally. So I want to get to the heart of the main question I had, and I always have for people when you read this, and I always worry for people. Sanderson mentions this. He has a hard time, you got to be careful with bringing characters back to life.
Oh, yeah.
And he puts it great, and he pulls it off well. But what do you think? Is it okay to bring back a character?
I think the way that he did it was perfectly acceptable to me. And I am one that is very willing to say when I don't appreciate something that an author did. But I do agree, and I think his reasons were awesome. He's just Kelsier's story is not done yet.
Yeah.
He's in general, I want people to know that death of a major character is possible and it's final and that happens, but Kelsier's story is not done. And I thought that was great.
Yeah. And how fitting is that? Because I remember reading that first book, and I feel like everybody feels that way. You're like, what? You're just going to kill Kelsier off in the first book?
Yeah.
He is just such a cool character. Very cool. Very mysterious. Very sinister, but also a hero at the same time.
He's on the line of being a hero because you see how he interacts with people even in the Secret History and when he's alive, and you're as you learn more about his character and what he chooses to do and the way he makes decisions, you're there's a lot of selfishness, that's a really hard word, in all the things that he does. He's he wants to survive for him.
Yep.
But then as he's surviving, his purpose is to effect change.
Yeah.
As the way he sees it. Obviously his first goal is to survive, and he takes advantage of situations to do that. But then he also is big into, okay, now that I'm alive, now that I'm here, I'm going to lead some change. And he's big into taking leadership positions anywhere he can.
Oh yeah, for sure. And there were two big moments from this book that reminded me of Kelsier and his questionable character. And you talked specifically about, is he doing things for selfish reasons? And he is too selfish, of course, at times, to the point where even Ruin mentions to him, he's Mare would have loved to have seen you, and you decided to abandon her. And I'm ooh, that is...
You could have been with Mare right now.
Yeah, you could be with your wife, and you decided that you would rather not die. You'd rather leave her by herself and go join her. Which is brutal, but it's also kind of true.
It's Kelsier's story.
Yeah. He's just well, it's me. I've got to be the person to save the world. I've got to do this. But to flip that, he actually does save the world. He is the reason that all of this is able to happen. And of course, it couldn't have happened without Vin, couldn't have happened without Sazed. All those people were very important, but he played a key role that got it to there.
Yeah, I think he's a necessary element to this story and the Mistborn story and probably many stories in the future. He's a character that has to be there so that these kinds of things happen, but they have to be done by a specific person. Because Sazed would never do stuff like this. Preservation on his own, even Vin, like no one would do these things to just be like, you know what? I see the natural order of things, and I'm just going to do the opposite.
Yep.
Just because I can, and I'm going to try and figure it out.
Yep.
He's like stuck in the Well of Ascension for like who knows how long, 2 Mistborn books, at least. And it's just crazy that he's like, I'm just going to figure this out. Do whatever I have to do. He never resigns. He's never resigns to a fate.
Oh yeah, and which is inspiring too, though, to be like that. Yeah, he's incredible. I personally hope that we get more Kelsier. I want Kelsier stories. Besides, like, this Secret History was great, but I want a book where he plays a main role.
It seems like it took a little long time to get Secret History out, so I'm not sure that it's very likely to get that. Besides maybe the Ghostblood series.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, he's got to come back. And
but the Ghostblood series is supposed to take place in the future, similar to how Era 2 took place, right?
Yeah.
So I highly doubt that there would be a side story of Kelsier.
But you hear him mentioned in The Way of Kings as Thydakar.
That's true.
So he is around, right? Like, he's got to be.
That's true. He's there. He's there in the background. I'm certain of it.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
I just hope that he makes it that far out into Ghostbloods. He's got it. I think he's the Ghostbloods.
He is the Ghostbloods.
Yeah, he is the Ghostblood. He's got to be one of the main characters in those later books, right?
I'm very curious to see how that process of getting to where he is now. But I wonder if it'll be a short story or if it'll just be the beginning of the Ghostblood series.
Oh, just his
transition.
His role?
From where we see him at the end of Secret History to the Thydakar that we know from The Way of Kings. There has to be some sort of transition.
Yeah, that explains like how he gets there.
Yeah, he's a huge transition that he has to make to gain a whole lot of wisdom, enough to be able to just like have his hands in every...
Well, you don't think that this is the short story that kicks that off? Like,
it might be, but that obviously doesn't explain it.
I know. Yes.
Where does he learn all of these things? Where does he
leaves
connected
holes.
To all this?
Yeah, right.
But I think it's on purpose so we can write more stories, which I like.
No, I do. I love that.
Speaking of side stories, my biggest question from the Secret History overall.
Okay.
And it's a spoiler, unfortunately. It's a spoiler for the Stormlight Archive.
Okay.
So if you haven't read Stormlight Archive, skip like 30 seconds to a minute. I'm sorry. Wouldn't it be crazy? You know how Wit's collecting all of these things?
Oh, yeah.
Why could Wit be the champion? Dalinar knows Wit.
It's a good theory. I would say no because
I want it to be so bad.
I'm going to guess no because of what we've read in The Sunlit Man, that he can't hurt anyone. He's like...
Maybe. I don't know. I just think he's been collecting all these skills. And that would be an epic... I would love to see Wit fight.
Yeah.
That would be wild.
Everyone would love to see Wit fight. The guy's amazing.
It would be pretty awesome. I think it'd be cool. Anyway, spoiler
it would be cool.
over.
It's not... Well, yeah. It's not a bad idea. It is amazing to see. So in this book, we realize that Wit is collecting powers from different locations.
Is it so? This is something actually that. So we're over with the spoiler, but
he's bonded a Spren.
So we know that he's bonded a Spren. We also know that he's collecting. So I think he's collecting connection. I don't think he's just collecting powers.
Oh, interesting.
Because remember we learned that when they talked about the strength, and he starts to see the power in people and metals and things like that.
In the Mistborn Secret History?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He talks about that, and they talk about connection. They talk about, like, investiture is a general concept. I don't think they talk about that specifically.
Yeah.
But then connection is something that's important because you can't burn the metals of Scadrian, the Scadrian system.
Yeah.
Without being connected to that ecosystem. We learn a little bit about that in The Sunlit Man. Like, you have to be connected. You have to have that connection of investiture before you can actually use and interact with the power. So I wonder if that's what he's doing. He just wants to be connected to each of these power systems.
Fascinating. I also wonder if he's going around collecting these. I wonder if his goal is to become more powerful than a shard. Yeah, like basically, but without being constrained to the will of the power, because that's the problem with preservation and ruin and odium. When you take on the power,
you also have that will.
It becomes your will, is that whatever that emotion is.
And he's very much one who likes to do whatever he wants to do.
Right. And so he's like, well, why don't I just go and pick up all of their powers for myself without having to deal with the mantle of godhood?
So he's like the new generation of Adonalsium.
Right.
Like all the power, but whatever he wants to do.
Yeah.
But he's very anti-Ghostblood, too.
I know. but that's the part I don't even know if he's anti-ghost blood or not. Like, is he or is he not?
He has to be. I thought we learned that. Where did I feel like we learned that? Sunlit Man, maybe? Where it was very much like he was trying to do the opposite of what Thydakar was doing.
That I think it's Rhythm of War. Like, Rhythm of War feels very much that way.
We'll get there.
Yeah, Rhythm of War just brings up a lot of these questions.
A lot of cool Cosmere stuff happens in Rhythm of War.
Rhythm of War also goes into the connections as well. It's very deep on like the connections.
See,
honestly, that was
now I have a better base to read Rhythm of War again.
Oh yeah, dude. That was one of my favorite reasons for like reading Rhythm of War, and we'll get there. We'll talk all about it. But it goes deep into how everything's connected, like everyone's connection to the shards, each other. Like, doesn't Dalinar or someone even see like little like strings almost like coming from one person to the next? And
because he's the bondsmith, right?
Yeah, and he's able to see the strings of connectivity and how people connect. And
that's pretty interesting.
I've got to read those parts again, but like more seriously, like just like maybe I'll have to pull out the book for that moment, just actually figure out what's going on there.
Flip through it manually.
Speaking of, though, I was just going through trying to learn more about like the Irie and who the heck they are.
Yeah.
Like right before this podcast, I'm like, Jaden, I'm not going to get eviscerated by the people in the comments for like saying something dumb about who the Irie are.
Most of the comments are awesome and we love them. Sometimes we learn things
the hard way.
Sometimes forcibly. Yeah,
it's awesome. But the Irie, so they're the people that Kelsier goes and visits to try and figure out how he can stop Ruin.
Yep.
And he gets an idea of saying, hey, maybe I can go to the Irie. They might have some help. He gets there and he finds out that they have this powerful orb, which he eventually uses to go and become preservation. But who are the Irie? There are these people that are just down there. And I was like, okay, are these the people that we've read about in Mistborn Era 2? And that's what I would have guessed if I was reading, if I hadn't read the Wikipedia before this. The Irie have nothing to do with these people.
Oh, okay.
They are people who are traveling the cognitive realm. They're a group of big world hoppers, like a big group of world hoppers that are actually from the world of Elantris.
Oh, so have you seen them in Elantris?
I don't know. It's been so long since I've read that book. I've got to read it again. So.
I haven't read it, so I have no...
Yeah. And honestly, I don't remember them at all in that book. And so I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it's just the name.
The Wikipedia page was pretty long.
It was super long. I was so shocked. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm like, you guys like know so much. But half those references I'm realizing were straight from Brandon Sanderson's signings. And so they must be from people asking questions and people like recording all these things and stuff. It's not even from the book, man. Like,
yeah, I would have assumed that all this was just in Brandon Sanderson's head, but apparently there are people who collect this information from every nook and cranny that exists, which is cool. But man, it's not me.
And we still don't even know everything. Can you imagine being Brandon Sanderson and trying to create a world that has this much detail on who everyone is?
Where people are analyzing every single thing about every single planet and system. And
which makes it feel like there are like not even just a few groups of people that are important, but like dozens and dozens of important groups all over the world, like universe, just influence each other. It's just so... complex.
His concept maps must be insane.
Yeah, insane.
Just to not miss details. Like little details could really obliterate a power system.
Yeah.
Where like you're just waiting for him to be like, oh, I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
You know, all these people are spending a heck of a lot of time thinking through every little detail that might be anything. You know, like there's a whole Wikipedia page on the stick.
Oh.
So you think about the fact that any little element could really unravel one of his stories, but I think he's still one step ahead, at least, of everyone who's figuring this out.
And I think he even has a team specifically at Dragonsteel, his company, that go through his books and just I think they call it a continuity team.
Do you wonder if it's the same people? Do you wonder if it's those people that like, oh, I was a moderator of the 17th Shard for 3 years, and then Dragonsteel called and asked if I wanted to be a continuity expert.
Honestly, dude, I wouldn't be surprised if they've done that and had a few people.
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
You're already passionate about it. Might as well bring you onto the team.
Dude, can you imagine? That'd be nuts.
That would be nuts. But if those people are like make their living on spoilers, and now they have all the information, they can't spoil it anymore.
Oh, dude, I thought about this so many times. Like how they have like the alpha and beta readers for all of his books. I'm like, would I want to be an alpha or beta reader? And my answer is no. I would not like to be that.
Hot take.
I know. It's because
Marty is declining his future role as alpha reader for Brandon Sanderson.
If you were an alpha reader, you've probably already read The Knights of Wind and Truth right now.
Yeah.
How like fun is that? I don't think that's fun. because you can't talk to anyone about it. You're only seeing like the like rough version of it, not even the fully polished version, so you don't get the full like Sanderson like this is a masterpiece effect.
And
like,
you probably wouldn't even get the same reading experience because you'd be expected to like be making detailed notes on things like continuity and grammar. I don't know. I guess you wouldn't be an editor, but it'd still be not as fun, I guess, as the reveal of the finished work.
Yeah, and a little part of me also thinks like, well, I could get the book early and I could read it early. That'd be fun.
How do you get the book early?
Well, it's
as an alpha tester, sorry.
Yeah.
They're saying as an alternate option.
No, yeah. You get the book early, but then that just means you have to wait even longer for the next book. Like you're going to have like that same 3-4 year span in between each of these massive books, no matter if you're the alpha reader or normal reader.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Slight tangent, but that's one of the reasons I've never understood these like new banks that are like, get your paycheck 2 days early. Like that only matters once.
Yep.
And then it's still 2 weeks until you can get your paycheck 2 days early, but it's still 2 weeks.
Yeah. In fact, it will be 16 days until you're getting your next paycheck if you don't do it early every single time.
Yeah. That makes no sense, but these banks make it sound like they're like the best thing ever. Yeah. I'm like, it was insane to me.
Yeah.
Like it just blows my mind that that's such a selling point. But you're right. It's still the same interval. You're still waiting.
Yep.
You don't get any of that real benefit except for the fact that you get a less polished book and less community hype. That's what I'm going to call it.
Yep. In banks and books,
ooh,
it does not make a difference.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
You heard it here first. Yeah. Okay, the last thing I wanted to mention, though, I love recommending this book to people after they've read the Stormlight Archive. Yeah. At least the first 2 books, if not the third book as well, because you get really introduced to Wit. And it is really clear when you meet Wit for the first time in this book. You're like, oh, that's Wit. Like,
so that's a follow-up question that I have. And we'll talk about our final ratings of Secret History in a moment. Yep. But I guess a spoiler, it's above a 7 because I would recommend it. But I would recommend it with an asterisk, exactly the same as you. Like I wouldn't say free reign, go and read it.
Yeah.
Because I think that is a limitation to some of the Brandon Sanderson works, is that you really just can't dive into anything. There has to be a reading order. We have our own video on a full reading order that we would recommend.
I'd put a caveat that I think you can dive into anything at the start of a series. I think that you could dive into Way of Kings first if you wanted to, or you could dive into Mistborn first. Or
yeah, but would you send him to Alloy of Law first?
It was funny. I was just watching a video where Sanderson talks about, he's like, it blows my mind. I never wrote the Alloy of Law second Mistborn era series, ever intended for anyone to start there. He's like, I cannot tell you how many people have told me, like, that was my first book series of books I've ever read from you. And he's like, I was just impressed at how deep the lore was and the histories and stuff. And they just loved it.
Guess what? There's a prequel trilogy that you can read.
So apparently it can be read on its own. That blew my mind. But anyways.
Do you feel the same way about Secret History? It sounds like you don't.
Yeah, clearly no. I think Secret History, if you're going to start in the second era, which is weird to me that you would start there. But if you're going to start there, you probably could read it at the end of book 3. Actually, I take that back. You have to read Era 1 before you read this book.
I would say absolutely. Yeah. You don't even know who Kelsier is. It would make no sense.
That is 100% true. So you have to read Mistborn Era 1. And I think you don't have to, but you really have to read The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. Those 2 books.
I would say this is an add-on story. It's one of those stories where you kind of need a break from the deeper 1,000-page books.
Yep.
And you come back and you say, I'm going to read a quick little Secret History. That sounds great. Yep. But I wouldn't place it before reading Way of Kings, reading Words of Radiance, and at least Era 1, probably Era 2 as well.
Yeah. I am going to stick with, I think that you should still read it before you read Era 2.
Before?
Yep. It is just so much fun to jump into that connection, because this book really gets you the whole picture of how all of his Cosmere books are connected real quick.
Yeah.
It opens up your eyes. I get so excited for people because they're like, I've read Mistborn, I'm reading Way of Kings. Like, they're all in the Cosmere, but like, how are they even connected? And I'm like, oh, they're connected. Like, they're super connected. You just won't know it until you read this book, and then it just clicks, and you're like, wow, like there's something else going on here.
Yeah,
and
that's
you're
true.
able to see it. And that's just the coolest connection about Sanderson, is all of his little Easter eggs and all of his books. And
he is good at that.
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome how everything's connected. But I would still put an asterisk on it for sure, as far as recommending it to anyone.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would really agree. So I would rate this book honestly, I would probably give this like an 8.7 out of 10. Yeah, I wanted to give it 8.9. Thought an 8.5 was too low, but 8.7 because this book I think is every single time I when I think back on this book, I think like, man, like it just tells you a lot of cool information. It's like, it almost feels like a Wikipedia when I'm thinking about it in my head. But when I read it again, I'm like, this is a very engaging book. It's really exciting. It's really good. I love Kelsier's story. I love how it expands the Cosmere. Love how we get to realize Wit's role a lot more. All those things are super exciting. But for some reason, on reflection, whenever it's been a while since I've been separated from the book, I just think like, oh yeah, like you have to read it. Like not like it was the best book ever, but you just got to read it.
Interesting.
And like that, for some reason, that reflection brings it down.
So 8.7
for a novella.
I was gonna say that's my next question before I rate it. Is it a book? Is it a novella? Is it a short story?
Yeah.
Is that the same thing?
I think short story and novella is like the same thing.
Well, my rating for this novella short story is a little lower than yours. It's a 7.9. I know, and it sounds bad when you put it in the sevens, but one of the things that I didn't like about this is it does feel kind of a little bit aloof from the main story. Yeah. In the sense that it's kind of more of a fun side story. Yeah. But it does have cool elements. It does have cool Cosmere stuff. High sevens, absolutely. Almost an 8. I almost wanted to go 8.0. But I do think that there were it's just a little bit of splashes of different things. The Irie and the Orb, I feel like was its own contained story and could have been lifted out, and he could have gotten Preservation's power just automatically and kind of condensed that part. Like little things like that feel a little more disjointed to me, if that makes sense. Yeah. He needed the orb, but we spent a whole long time for him to get the orb just so to get Preservation's power, but that kind of bookended the already existing plot line. Anyway, that to say, I still recommend it, and I still really like it. And as far as novellas go, it was great. It wasn't an Emperor's Soul for me. Of course. It wasn't even a Sixth of the Dusk for me. Yeah. It was good enough to recommend. It's not the highest novella that I would rate.
Okay, there's a couple things I want to say based off of that. First of all,
can't change my rating.
No, it's not going to change your rating. It did remind me that one of the reasons, the struggles I had with this book is it does feel like I've already heard this story. I've read Mistborn Era 1. I know how this ends. I kind of know the steps and things like that. But again, it's kind of cool to see it from someone else's perspective. It just can't ever get as high as it could be with being a brand new story.
There's not much of a reveal. Like a journey of learning more about it. You're like, oh, that's a cool new spin on it. Yep. But you already kind of knew that Sazed was going to have the power at the end, so it's not really unique. Yep.
Exactly. The other thing that just occurred to me as well is like it is really weird to give this like a rating because it doesn't feel like its own book. Like it just feels like it's just a story that you read, and it's not really meant to be like its own rated thing. Or in whatever. It's just meant to be like like its own thing. It's just meant to be like just another perspective, which is interesting. I don't know. It's just really weird. It's funny to even call it like as we're saying this. Like, could I really call that a novella and another story that I like could give a rating? It's like rating a chapter out of another book, like
which maybe we'll do.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, we'll stop in the middle of Way of Kings and give a rating.
Give a midway point rating. That'd be funny. I do think. Yeah, I think it's important to. I like doing this because it allows us to almost stack rank like the individual short stories. Yeah. In a way that's like, I don't know. At some point, someone's going to come to me. They're going to be like, hey, are you that guy from that podcast? No, but they're going to ask you about Brandon Sanderson. They'll be like, okay, what's your favorite Brandon Sanderson short story? And it'd be nice to be like, you know what? If I had to say one was my favorite right now, I would say The Emperor's Soul. Yeah. It's my favorite short story that he wrote. And it's kind of cool to be like, I've thought through it. I've kind of analyzed it all. Instead of in that moment being like, oh, let me think through all of the short stories that I've read. And in this moment, you don't have that same context. So it's nice to, right after we read it, we give it a rating. Yeah. And then we can almost put it on the shelf in that order and then see exactly where we think it fits. From our perspective, obviously, super biased opinions. But it's kind of fun. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. So if looking back on this, out of all the short stories that we've read, we've read all of them in Arcanum Unbounded. We haven't read the one about Lift.
And I haven't read the Elantris one.
Yeah,
Or
the
don't read Hope of Elantris.
Okay, Hope of Elantris, like, it's not a spoiler or anything, but like it's not actually like a story. It's like a little like it's a story that he added because he had a student that he wrote into the story. Like,
nice.
Like, it's really fun. But
okay.
But now that we've read all of them, would you recommend someone starting with a short story of Brandon Sanderson's before reading one of their books? Would you ever recommend that to someone?
I would do this like writing a prescription. Okay? This is how I would do it. It would depend exactly on the person's situation, right? If there's someone who reads all the time and they're coming to me and they're saying, you know what, I kind of want to dive into this whole Brandon Sanderson thing, but I'm not ready to invest in a Mistborn or a Way of Kings. I'd be like, totally fine.
Yeah.
Jump into Emperor's Soul or Six of the Dusk. It would be super fun. I probably wouldn't say Shadows of Silence, but...
Really?
Not as a first one.
Oh,
but anyway.
A great one.
I would definitely, depending on the person, I would say, yeah, go for it. If it's someone that's like really excited to like, oh, I've just finished a really big book that I've read and I want to dive into something new, then I'd be like, maybe a 2-hour story isn't quite enough for that person. And you'd want to be like, start with Mistborn, dive into that world. But it would be like a prescription. It'd be like a doctor of fantasy novels.
That's right.
Write exactly what I think would be best for them. Because I do think it's an individual situation, which is something I've mentioned this on the podcast before. Something that you did when I started reading Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this. Back in the day.
Whoa.
But
back when I was young.
Exactly. It was kind of cool to have some sort of, you should start here. This is probably the best place to start. We've probably beat this story so many times. But when I first started Mistborn, it took me a long time to get into it. I read the first chapter 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
But if I hadn't started with Mistborn and I had started with like Way of Kings, I might not have gotten into it at all because it's even harder to get into. But that being said, maybe if I started with The Emperor's Soul or a short story, it would have been like, that was a great story. Maybe I have more momentum to get into trying to figure out who all these characters are in Mistborn. So I think every situation is unique, and that's a very long answer to your question.
I really like the answer. I thought it was great. Well, we would definitely recommend the story if you've read the Mistborn era.
What's our final rating?
Our final rating, you're going to do the math on.
8.3.
There we go.
8.7 and 7.9.
Camera math. You're brave.
I did it in my head while we were talking because I was worried.
That's great.
8.3 is our final for The Secret History. Mistborn, A Secret History.
Perfect. Well, if you liked it, if you disagree, if you whatever, leave a comment.
I want to hear your rating. You have to make a decimal rating if you've read it and put it in the comments because that's so fun. I like to see, do you agree with what we said? Is 7.9 just offensive to the Brandon Sanderson universe? I don't know, but maybe
me a little bit.
So I want to see your comments for sure. We love those, and we respond to basically every single one of them. So
yeah, we want to see that. We want subscriptions so we can get more people watching this.
Get this community moving.
Yeah, get it going.
It's awesome.
We've been impressed with how many people have been subscribing, and we love our fans.
Welcome to the team.
So
it's a blast.
It's great. So excited to be continuing with this as we move forward to Nights in Wind and Truth.
Absolutely. See you in the next one.